What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. And as you all know, we are currently covering Fatal Attractions. Now, we already covered the first 4 chapters of this crossover, but now it's time for us to get into the 5th chapter. And this will be Wolverine issue number 75. Now, here's the thing. This entire issue is kind of where we basically see an entire change in the character of Wolverine, but also for some people out there, this was the last issue they had collected when it came to Wolverine, because after this point, he goes through a complete change and fans were not really happy about the idea of the way they were going with Wolverine. And you'll see what I mean as we go through today's video and also other videos down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, for the 5th chapter of Fatal Attractions, it does pick up where the last chapter left off at. And remember, for the last chapter, we saw Magneto rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. And so right now, his healing factor has gone into overdrive. It's trying to repair all the damage that was done to his body thanks to Magneto. Now, with all that being said, let's also not forget that our heroes had defeated Magneto on his space base Avalon. Now, Bishop was able to bring a modified version of the Blackbird to get those heroes off the base and try to bring them down to Earth. The problem is that the Blackbird was not really made for re-entry. So right now, the Blackbird is slowly falling apart. But you have Charles Xavier and Jean Grey trying to access the mind of Wolverine to keep him somewhat sane. And the reason why, because all the pain he's going through at the moment, thanks to Magneto, is bringing back all the bad memories in his mind all at once. And that could cause some serious damage to the mind of Wolverine. And so for Jean Grey, she feels like they should just go ahead and erase all these bad things in his mind that had happened to him. But for Charles, he says, no, you can't do that, because all of these bad moments in his mind, they're part of his personality. They're part of him. If you try to get rid of that, it could completely change him or possibly break his mind. So unfortunately, we have to sit here and to make sure that all these different bad memories do not come together all at once to break the mind of Wolverine. Now, I should tell you that when it comes to this issue, we're going to jump back and forth with the whole idea of Bishop and the rest of the X-Men, minus Charles Xavier and Jean Grey, trying to keep the Blackbird together long enough so they're able to land safely, while you have Charles Xavier and Jean Grey trying to work on the mind of Wolverine. So we see our heroes doing everything they can to just keep the Blackbird together, but it seems like every single time they get one thing handled, something else just pops off when it comes to the Blackbird. It's Bishop panicking. We're kind of left to believe in the possibility that our heroes are going to die. Now, you do have Charles Xavier call out for Moira McTaggart on the radio. Here's the reason why. Because for Charles Xavier, thanks to his battle with Magneto in the last chapter, the man is almost completely drained of energy. And so this is Charles Xavier calling out to Moira saying, listen, I need you to talk me through all the different things I need to do when it comes to medical stuff to keep Wolverine alive, while I try my best to use my energy to keep his mind together. Now, while you have those two characters talking, Jubilee is in the room. Let's not forget that back in the 70s and 80s, Kitty Pryde was more the sidekick to Wolverine. She was kind of like the daughter for Storm and Wolverine. They were like her mother and father. But in the 90s, she left, went over to Excalibur, and then left the door open for somebody else to take that role. And there came Jubilee. And so Jubilee is hearing the possibility that Wolverine might die. And so she's wondering if there's any way he could possibly survive. Now, I kind of hate to repeat myself, but we got to jump back over to the rest of the X-Men who are trying to keep the Blackbird together. And the reason why I want to call back over to that, because this is a callback to the Phoenix Saga. Because as you have our heroes on the Blackbird trying to re-enter the Earth, they're going through a radiation storm like they did back in the Phoenix Saga. And of course, as we all know, the X-Men back then Was Jean Grey trying her best to keep the spaceship together to protect her friends and her lover Cyclops? Now, back then, it did lead into her supposedly turning into the Phoenix until some retcons happened, but either way, for our heroes, they're going through another radiation storm. And so while going through that, the other X-Men who are back at the X-Mansion, like Cyclops, he's freaking out because he's having flashbacks to what happened to Jean Grey back then. He believes that she is going to die once again while trying to survive this whole idea of going through another radiation storm. But for Charles Xavier, while trying to work on the mind of Wolverine, it's Wolverine going through or reliving the worst moments of his past. The whole idea of Weapon X, Magneto ripping off the adamantium off his bones. It's Wolverine having a hard time just trying to keep his mind together. And Charles right now is trying his best to keep Wolverine's mind together. But for Wolverine, he then tells Charles that he hears music. It's all the people that he had loved in the past who had died singing to him, calling out to him. Now for Charles, he knows what that means. It's basically death calling out for Wolverine. Is Wolverine on the verge of dying? It's Charles saying, Logan, don't go that way. You are going to die. But for Logan, he wants to die. He wants to go ahead and just move on his life and go over to the afterlife. Now, this leads into, this leads into a discussion I kind of want to have. And the reason why, because, over the years in Marvel Comics, right, we always say that Jean Grey is madly in love with Cyclops. Like, that's her first love no matter what. And Wolverine is always her second choice. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, because over the years, you would have X-Men fans look back at different moments and be like, hey, at that time right there, you could tell that Jean Grey would rather be with Wolverine than Cyclops. And for me personally, this is one of those moments. And let me explain why. Because you have Wolverine trying to go into the afterlife. He's okay with the idea of dying and moving on with his life. But the thing is, Illyana the angel say, no, it's not your time to die. And so while pushing him away, he hears all the other members of the X-Men calling out to Jean. And the reason why, because Jean Grey is about to die. She is about to be sucked out of the Blackbird and possibly die. And so she's hanging for her life. And so the other X-Men are not able to get to her. And so with her hanging for her life and them calling out for her, is Logan saying, I can't die yet because Jean Grey needs me. And so at the very last second, when it seems like Jean is going to die, Logan saves her by pulling her back in. But when he does, she says, Logan, you came back for me. And Logan said, no, I came back because you needed me. You called me back. Like, I came back here because I wanted you. And so it kind of seems like to me that Jean Grey would, be with Wolverine. It kind of seems like, hey, she's still technically, just a girlfriend of Cyclops, not fiance, not wife. Like, she could still leave Cyclops for Logan. And there is a chance here for it to happen. Now, some time has passed by after that moment where you had the heroes being able to get back to the X-Mansion safely. Now, Wolverine is supposed to be on the sideline. As Logan, there's no way he'll be on the sideline for too long. So you have the different X-Men, in the Danger Room going through a training session. And the reason why I'm bringing this up right now, because while you have the X-Men going through this training session, you have Logan wanting to get in. He's like, hey, you know what? Let me in. I want to see if I still have it. Now, his body is still recovering after what Magneto did to him. And so for Logan, as he goes through this actual training session, he's not what he used to be. Not as fast, not as strong. Like, he is really slowed down a lot and taking some big hits, and it really does hurt him a lot as well. But not being able to hit hard as he used to be. Now, this is the moment where you have fans kind of wondering, okay, where are they going to go next when it comes to Wolverine? Because as we all know, Wolverine's bones were laced with adamantium. If that was ripped off his body, does he still have his claws? And the answer is yes, he does. We learn right here that apparently his claws were bone claws that were originally laced with adamantium. And so that's why he had claws in his, well, hands. And so for Wolverine, he pops it out. But the problem is healing factor is still working overdrive here. And so when he does pop his claws out of his hand, he bleeds a lot. He's in serious pain. He's not able to properly heal up like he should. It's like, oh my God, they have to call in the medical team. Now, the ending of this book is Wolverine leaving the X-Men. And the reason why, because he has to figure out about his life, because he had no idea at first that he had those claws, those bone claws. He believed that originally the claws were implants, but now he's realizing that that's not true, that the adamantium just covered his bone claws. And so now he's wondering more about his past, but also kind of wondering what to do with his life. So he leaves a message, a letter for each member of the X-Men. But for Jubilee, it's him telling her, like, hey, I need you to stay here with Charles Xavier. Like, he can help you. He can guide you like he did me and the others. And so you have Logan leave. And that ends Fatal Attractions for the 5th chapter of this crossover. We still have one more chapter, and that would be Excalibur. And that would be our next video. So with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.